New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said to be on the short list for U.S. Attorney General, and just as a former aide is revealing some serious sexual harassment allegations against him.
Democratic strategist Roger Fisk and culture editor for The Federalist Emily Jashinsky are here to discuss. So great to see you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Good morning.
So this allegation comes from a woman named Lindsey Boylan. It was posted on Twitter. She's actually candidate for Manhattan borough president. And what she tweeted, I'm just going to read this all out. And again, Cuomo has denied it. But she says, my first experience of workplace sexual harassment was when my mom got her first real office job after graduating from college when I was in high school. She was so excited to be taken seriously. Her boss isolated her and kissed her. She never had that type of job again. It was then how I learned how hard it is for women, how hard this world can be for us when we're trying to be taken seriously and help our community, how easily jerks can destroy the lives of women. And I promised myself I would never let those kind of guys win. I would work hard my whole life to put myself in positions of power, to change things, to end the violence and corruption, to give voice to the voiceless. Yes, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed me for years. Many saw it and watched. I could never anticipate what to expect. Would I be grilled on my work, which was very good, or harassed about my looks, or would it be both in the same conversation? This was the way for years. And she goes on and she indicates that she knows she is not the only woman. Roger, what is your view of this allegation, and especially in context of him being considered for the AG post in a Biden administration?
Of course. First, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to be here with Emily. I have no problem, walking down this road. And any person, specifically almost always women, that has the courage to come forward with an accusation, I believe it deserves scrutiny. It should be investigated. She should have her day. She should be willing to participate in kind of the legal kind of pursuit of whatever the truth may be. But I say, she should pursue this. I'm not going to be reflexive kind of defender of anyone based on their party or ideology. And when someone comes forward and says something like this, it has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, this is the interesting thing, which is that Miss Boylan has actually even said, quote, I have no interest in talking to journalists. And so this is going to be a tough one to litigate. And what's interesting also is I have seen this is almost as much of a media story as well. I mean, there has been almost no scrutiny whenever it has come to this. I see write-ups in some of the major papers, but in terms of the top line, accusation and news for something like this, especially in context of the AG post, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, you just referenced the quote that I really wanted to narrow in on, which is that she said she has no interest in talking to journalists. She's absolutely right that it's super easy for jerks to completely upend everybody's lives by, engaging in sexual harassment, the full spectrum of sexual harassment. It's very easy for them to do it. It's very easy for them to get away with. And so I think she should be taken seriously. I think her claim should be investigated. But if you have no interest in talking to journalists, that's her prerogative. It is going to make this very difficult to litigate. And we have seen time and again why we need to be careful in litigating these issues. We cannot just sort of jump when you have one accuser and blast it everywhere before scrutinizing it. Right. She says many people have seen it. She says there are other people who could be spoken with. So talk to those people, find those people, and she can help journalists. She can point them in that direction. But the media is our critical arena to litigate these things, especially when they're after the fact. Especially, she does not currently work for Andrew Cuomo. So to say you're not going to talk to journalists does make this much more difficult. And so I hope that, people are looking into this right now and we will get answers to these questions, because if you float the accusation publicly, then we need to do the legwork and see how much merit it has.
Well, and you also wonder, Emily, if her saying she doesn't want to talk to journalists, look, I mean, this guy has been loved by most of the media and completely lionized for his supposedly amazing coronavirus approach. Of course, we've covered here extensively the bad decisions with regard to nursing homes and more. But it seems like that almost gives them an out to say, well, she's not going to talk to us. So nothing to see here. When she indicates not only many saw it and watched her specific harassment, but also that she knows she's not the only woman. So it seems like there would be some potential avenues for journalists to potentially follow here.
Yeah, and it'll be very telling how quickly and how deeply we get stories about this. I think, it's completely true. Like, I wouldn't want to really talk to journalists either, especially because journalists have fawned over Andrew Cuomo at the time when they should be heavily scrutinizing him. I mean, the guy was like engaging in horseplay on CNN every night while people in his state were dying. And so, yeah, I wouldn't want to talk to journalists either. But I do think it'll be really telling to see how quickly journalists follow this trail, because if it's Andrew Cuomo, somebody as high profile as Andrew Cuomo, on the one hand, that makes it more difficult for women to speak out. On the other hand, it means that there are a lot of people who've worked with them over the years. So, again, to see what journalists sort of dig up in the next few days, I think we should pay very close attention to.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, so Roger, let's talk about just the merits of the claim, which is that you see Cuomo, he wrote a book here, his victory over Corona, despite the fact that he had a lot of problems under his own handling of that. What does it say that he's being not only being floated for attorney general, but really there's never been any acknowledgement around his missteps of the handling of the pandemic. And before you go there, we have covered the Trump administration's mishandling here extensively.
Yes.
They're not mutually exclusive.
You just removed multiple bullets from my rhetorical gun there, Sagar. It's an interesting dichotomy, and I'd like to just build on Emily's point for a quick second. We're to a point, and for example, I've had a friend whose family members have gone through being victimized by a mass shooting, for example. And, when they reached out to me and I was providing counsel to him, I actually said to him, like, just because the satellite trucks pull up in front of your house, that doesn't mean that you have to go out and talk to them. So my point in this is that we're to the point culturally where I think if the media is just making constant inquiries that somehow an individual is, somewhat bound to then interact. The flip side, and to specifically build on Emily's point, it might not necessarily be to like a criminal extent, and then, but at the same time, worthy of scrutiny and worthy of discussion and worthy of being in the public square. And that's where, oddly enough, the media is so important, because if it's in that gray area where it is a reflection of him as a person or a reflection of how he's conducted himself as a manager, but it's not necessarily criminal or something like that, then the media is really almost the only arena in which something like this can receive some level of investigation and ultimately some kind of truth, if not justice. To get to your specific point, Sagar, and I'll end here. It's always interesting to me when people are willing to kind of be lionized, and if I think back to the spring and the summer, and you could kind of see him reveling in this kind of, glow that he had was receiving. Some of that, and to go towards where you thought I was going to go, some of that was because it was such an interesting reflective surface to what we were seeing on the national level. So I won't get into names or anything, but you can assume what I'm saying. But then in a Shakespearean way, like, when you buy into that lionization of self, that almost by definition is setting in motion, if not the downfall, then some kind of comeuppance, right? And that's what I think is going on here.
That's really interesting.
I think you're right.
And lastly, Roger, you've seen up close how these processes unfold, and some of the people in Biden world, though you're not affiliated with them, we should be clear. What's your sense of how serious they are about potentially picking Cuomo for AG, and also what kind of vetting goes into those picks?
This has to be taken seriously, right? I mean, in one sense, I can think back to the National Enquirer story that said John Kerry had an affair with an intern. I can think back to the story that Barack Obama had something else going on. I mean, we do have to pursue these things to some kind of conclusion. Because I think we can all agree that an accusation is the beginning. It's not the end. But that said, and I've been somewhat familiar with some of the vetting process. I mean, very quietly, there will be people that will, to the best of their ability, based on public information and any number of other things, just in terms of like matching up dates on schedules and stuff, right? Like, was this person actually even in that zip code when this ostensibly happened? Things like that. But it won't necessarily, the accusation won't necessarily fundamentally alter the trajectory of a decision-making process, but it will be part of that decision-making process and trying as best as they can to exhaust it.
Got it. Well, really interesting, guys. Thank you. We're going to be back with more Rising right after this.